Walter Cronkite once said that journalism is what we need to make democracy work. He was absolutely right, which is why today's assault on journalism by Wall Street, billionaire businessmen, Silicon Valley, and Donald Trump presents a crisis, and why we must take concrete action. This is an op-ed that Bernie wrote back in August of 2019. Real journalism is different from the gossip, punditry, and clickbait that dominates today's news. Real journalism, in the words of Joseph Pulitzer, is the painstaking reporting that will fight for progress and reform, never tolerate injustice or corruption, and always fight demagogues. Pulitzer said that journalism must always oppose privileged classes and public plunderers, never lack sympathy with the poor, always remain devoted to the public welfare, never be satisfied with merely printing news, always be drastically independent, never be afraid to attack wrong, whether by predatory plutocracy or predatory poverty. When we have had real journalism, we have seen crimes like Watergate exposed and confronted, leading to anti-corruption reforms. When we have lacked real journalism, we have seen crimes like mortgage fraud go unnoticed and unpunished, leading to a devastating financial crisis that destroyed millions of Americans' lives. Real journalism requires significant resources. One reason we do not have enough real journalism in America right now is because many outlets are being gutted by the same forces of greed that are pillaging our economy. For example, two Silicon Valley corporations, Facebook and Google, control 60% of the entire digital advertising market. They have used monopolistic control to siphon off advertising revenues from news organizations. A recent study by the News Media Alliance, a trade organization, found that in 2018, as newspaper revenues declined, Google made $4.7 billion off reporting that Google did not pay for. At the same time, corporate conglomerates and hedge fund vultures have bought and consolidated beleaguered local newspapers and slashed their newsrooms, all while giving executives big payouts. Gannett's proposed merger with Gatehouse Media, for instance, will consolidate hundreds of publications under one mega corporation's control and slash $300 million worth of synergies, which is often corporate speak for layoffs. Synergies equals layoffs. Matt Pierce, a reporter for the Los Angeles Times, notes that the new Gannett Gatehouse CEO is getting $4.5 million in bonuses in stock just for walking in the door. The result of these trends has been the decimation of journalism. Over the past 15 years, more than 1,400 communities across the country have lost newspapers, which are the outlets local television, radio, and digital news sites rely on for reporting. Since 2008, we have seen newsrooms lose 28,000 employees, and in the past year alone, 3,200 people in the media industry have been laid off. Today, for every working journalist, there are 6 people now working in public relations, often pushing a corporate line. At precisely the moment when we need more reporters covering the healthcare crisis, the climate emergency, and economic inequality, we have television pundits paid tens of millions of dollars to pontificate about frivolous political gossip as local news outlets are eviscerated. The negative effects are predictable. According to a working paper by researchers at Notre Dame and the University of Illinois, when newsrooms are hollowed out, overall costs to taxpayers rise because there are fewer reporters scrutinizing government transactions. A study published by Spotlight on Poverty and Opportunity, a nonpartisan forum, found that despite millions of Americans struggling to survive, budget-strapped newsrooms have not turned their attention to poverty. To be sure, when we see the Miami Herald expose on Jeffrey Epstein or the Charleston Gazette Mail's courageous reporting on the opioid crisis, we know that good reporters are still overcoming the odds and managing to produce essential journalism that scrutinizes power, exposes wrongdoing, and challenges the status quo. But we know that those success stories are too often the exception and not the norm.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all, at all, at all.
It was very much, Crystal, a disconnect between what was happening in reality and what was happening on TV. And you talk about reality TV. It was really different to travel all across this country, to see the energy, the crowds, the commitment, the heart and soul efforts that was put in by the grassroots people of this nation in support of the Sanders campaign. And then not to even have it be a blip on the screen many times on mainstream media was really surreal. There were many moments where I thought we were in the twilight zone. The disconnect between what we would hear on national TV and what was really happening on the ground. And so Bernie Blackout, I'm really glad that somebody took the time to tell the story.
Yeah, and Nina, I mean, one of the things we covered often, this was always with you in particular, is that you were kind of erased from the campaign. I mean, your status in the campaign, Breonna Joy Gray's status in the campaign, were always ignored in favor of this kind of like Bernie having a white movement. Now, obviously, like, I don't have a stake in this, but watching that, I always thought that was something that was particularly unfair. Could you talk about that piece of it?
Yes, don't even get me started on that. It is erasure that happens to Black women throughout history. What is most unfortunate and untenable is that it is still happening in the 21st century. I served as a national co-chair of this campaign along with some amazing people. Mayor Carmen Cruz, a Latina, was one of the co-chairs. We had our brother Congressman Ro Khanna and our other brother Ben Cohen. And so we were that rainbow mosaic. And my colleagues named me the co-chair of the co-chairs, the first among equals. And I carried this campaign all across this country. And the fact that people like me, that I would be erased, as you mentioned, Sagar, people like Breonna Joy Gray, and also, Mayor Cruz. And then when you look at the voters, I mean, there was a mix of voters who supported the senator. We have African-American millennials that overwhelmingly supported Senator Sanders. We know that our Latina ex-sisters and brothers have overwhelmingly supported Senator Sanders, but still, they could never get off of that narrative and never let the truth get in the way of a good story. If you look at who continued to be the top two candidates in the race, one propped up by mainstream media and the other candidate doing the hard work to win over those voters, they in fact had a more diverse pool of voters than all the other candidates. Think about that. But the only candidate that the mainstream media continued to tease out and say he doesn't have a diverse coalition was Senator Bernie Sanders, when in fact he had more African-American support and more support of people of color than Mr. Buttigieg, than Senator Elizabeth Warren, than Senator Amy Klobuchar, and on and on. And so the fact that the media needs to really do a better job to make sure that they get more diversity, not just in phenotype, but diversity of ideas and also backgrounds. I know you and Crystal talk a lot about the class system within the mainstream media, that there is not a working class dynamic. They need to do a better job of making sure all of those voices are heard. And the Sanders campaign really was a reflection of a multiracial, multi-gendered coalition of social conscious-minded people. But if you turned on TV, you would never know it.
Media and the American Ruling Class. Reflections on Vice TV's Bernie Blackout by Alan Minsky. I watched the new documentary Bernie Blackout on Vice TV this week. It tracks the unrelenting bias against the Bernie Sanders campaign in the mainstream media from the beginning to the end of the 2020 presidential primary race. I recommend the film to anyone who wants to understand contemporary American society, and thus to everyone who hopes to see positive social and political change in our time. America, we are told, is a democratic society, that the people are sovereign, and that their rule is expressed through the ballot box. Yet a recent study showed what most of us have long understood to be true about the American political system, that it serves the wealthy and powerful few and not the vast majority. The Bernie Blackout reveals one of the mechanisms by which powerful interests are protected from interference by the people. However, Naked media bias, like that documented in the film, is not the favored means through which unwelcome political ideas are marginalized by the powerful. As American democracy has devolved in recent decades, the first barrier is money. Both in 2016 and 2020, Sanders was able to do what wasn't supposed to be possible. He raised the astronomical sums necessary to run a competitive national campaign without relying on the oligarchs and major corporations that fund all of the mainstream candidates, thus purchasing their fealty. Spectacularly, Bernie did this through a record-shattering number of small donations. Let's pause here and reflect, because not even the Bernie Blackout makes enough of this achievement. In an honest democracy, no candidate should have to raise the type of money that Bernie did. Campaigns should be publicly funded. However, powerful interests in America have devised a system to ensure that candidates serve them, not the general public. This is, of course, a reprehensible corruption of democracy. Bernie wants to end this current system of bribery. In light of that fact, what the Sanders campaign achieved through small donations was truly an exemplary manifestation of democracy in action. Both Sanders campaigns were mass uprisings against oligarchy, intended to salvage American democracy and reinstate popular rule, the one thing most hated by a ruling class. So Bernie was able to overcome the first barrier, money, in his effort to bring balance to our economy and society. The film documents the next level of defense by the powers that be: derisive, unrelenting, substanceless attacks across the major broadcast and print media. The word substanceless here is important because if you think about the Sanders agenda, it's pretty hard to debunk on its merits. Think about it through the lens of political science. We humans are quirky. It's hard to draw scientific conclusions about our behavior. However, modern industrial technological societies have been around long enough now that we can draw some pretty clear inferences about them. For instance, when countries are ranked according to human welfare indices like happiness, health, education, prosperity, low crime, absence of poverty, etc., the countries of Northern Europe always rank at the top. In particular, the Scandinavian countries, but you can throw in Germany and the Netherlands for a larger population sample. So scientifically, we should ask what it is about these countries that produces these positive outcomes. Have they always been prosperous? Nope. Are they resource rich? Nope. Is it the climate? Not at all. It's simple. It's their social organization, which in all of these countries is social democratic, or in Bernie's lingo, democratic socialist. The entire Bernie Sanders political movement is based on the proposition, informed by looking out at the rest of the world, that we should reorganize American society to make it more like the countries in the world that produce the best lives for their citizens. You can check the videotape. Bernie has been saying this from the day that he launched his first presidential campaign. So there's nothing sinister about Bernie's agenda. Fair national media would have reflected this. In fact, honest brokers would have been fascinated. Is it possible to have a school system like Finland's in America? How do Swedish businesses thrive when workers have so many vacation days? Why is wealth inequality so low in Holland? What's the secret to German manufacturing, to Danish green energy? How, Bernie, can America arrive at these outcomes? We never heard those questions asked in the mainstream media. No one ever asked Pete Buttigieg or Amy Klobuchar why they objected to American workers having it as good as Scandinavian workers. So, Kamala Harris, you're saying that American kids are more stupid than Finnish kids? Why, Joe Biden, have German factories remained in Germany with high wages when so many American businesses moved production overseas? Not going to happen in a million years. The mainstream media is bought and paid for by the American ruling class, and the last thing they want is a well-informed, politically engaged American citizenry.
Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
That would signal the end of their rule, for it would end their ability to take the lion's share of all the wealth. So Bernie had to be mocked or made threatening, as documented in the Bernie Blackout. So where does that leave us? Was Bernie always destined to fail? Did his two campaigns, which effectively took third place in two successive presidential elections, get as close as is possible for a pro-people candidate in our unfair, imbalanced system? It's probably too soon to draw that conclusion, especially given the overwhelming support for Sanders and his transformative politics among younger Americans. Also, given how severe the COVID-19 crisis is proving to be, it's impossible to know where we'll be in 3 months, let alone in 4 years. And certainly the Sanders agenda is fresh in people's minds as we go through this period of unprecedented turmoil. However, whether it's in the 2024 presidential election cycle or in a few months due to the calamitous impact of the pandemic, we must understand the lesson of the Bernie Blackout and, indeed, of the two Sanders runs for president. It's simple. The powers that be will do everything possible to block progressive left politics from getting the upper hand in our political system. Next time, progressives have to be ever more powerful themselves in order to triumph. In particular, left-friendly alternative media needs to grow. The goal has to be nothing short of attaining an audience comparable to the mainstream. Fortunately, there's good news on that front. New left and left-friendly digital media has started to come of age over the past couple of years, inspired to a considerable degree by Sanders' 2016 campaign. They go on to say nice things about Cenk Uygur, who received $20 million in funding from Jeffrey Katzenberg, who is a Hillary acolyte, so I'm not going to talk about Cenk in a nice tone of voice. And then they talk about other people who are more or less sheepdogs, other than Jimmy Dore. So we've got, well, there are a few other exceptions here. People who are not. Kyle Kulinski is not a sheepdog. Crystal Ball is not a sheepdog. Katie Halper is not a sheepdog. Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal, they're not sheepdogs. Glenn Greenwald, Chris Hedges, they're not sheepdogs. Richard Wolff is not a sheepdog. Paul Street is not a sheepdog. So there's hope. But don't look to Cenk Uygur to save us. He'll tell us, he's already telling us to vote for Joe fucking Biden, and he's having Twitter wars with Kyle Kulinski about it. Norm Solomon is back on the sheepdog beat. He was telling Richard Esco that we need to have Elizabeth Warren as Biden's running mate. If you still think Elizabeth Warren is a progressive, you really aren't paying attention.
People are standing up for justice. That is what this campaign is about.
Democracy has been stolen from us.
The entire establishment came against Bernie.
The mainstream media isn't owned by the people. It's owned by rich people.
Even as Sanders did better and better in the polls, there's always sort of a new counter-narrative that was meant to sort of take him down.
We're always told that CNN and MSNBC are the anti-Trump channels. They're also the anti-Bernie channels.
One thing that we learned in this campaign is how powerful mainstream media still really is.
So that came out yesterday. Yesterday, from when we're recording this segment. I don't know when this segment is going to be released on YouTube. But I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to watch it. But that trailer does look interesting. Somebody pointed this out on Twitter, and I think it's funny. They were like, credit to Vice. Thank you for this documentary. Curious how it released after Bernie dropped out. Yeah, that is questionable.
In the comments under Kyle's video, I said, we need a grassroots-funded, small-dollar media conglomerate, and Bernie's grassroots operatives could get it going. I would call it New Media Network. NMN, because Kyle calls the lefty media, independent media, new media. So as it turns out, New Media Network was already taken, so I decided, in honor of George Carlin, to call it No Owners Media Group, NOMG. Bernie already laid the groundwork for a true revolution by raising all the small dollar donations. I was trying to talk J.K. Rowling on Twitter into funding this kind of a new media network, and then somebody else said, yeah, but she's one of them, and she's a Russiagate conspiracy theorist, which I didn't know before. So yeah, I don't know that somebody like that is going to help out. But all of the small dollar donations, that's what true democracy really is. So if we could somehow hook up those dollars to a new media network, there would be a chance for us to completely defeat the system. Who knows when we'll get another candidate like Bernie who can raise all that money for a candidacy of the people. So maybe to get ready for the next Bernie, we should just take all that money and put it into a media network that would make it possible that a new person wouldn't have to raise so much money. I don't know if this would be a 501c4 or a 501c3 or how it would work. I don't know how to write the articles of incorporation to get it going. But if we had some place to put money, a jar to put money in, the same kinds of people who donated to Bernie's campaign would understand that this is the next thing that we need to do. Otherwise, we'll never have anyone like Bernie ever again. Obviously, it would have a board, it would have elections, it would be democratically run, and people could make a decent living as journalists without maybe making the kind of money that MSNBC pundits make, but still a decent living, and they could dedicate their lives to the kinds of things that Walter Cronkite said we need. Bernie and Walter Cronkite have it right. Journalism is what we need to make democracy work, and we need real journalism. For whatever reason, it doesn't look like it's going to be easy to talk Bernie into unsuspending his campaign, so maybe we could talk him into raising massive amounts of money for No Owners Media Group. If you think this is a good idea, please tweet this at Bernie Sanders on Twitter. And if you have any ideas for how to get an organization like this started, please leave a comment and please share this around to people who may understand how this all works better than I do. I have started a small nonprofit before, and I've written the articles of incorporation myself, but I don't think I'm up to this kind of a monumental task. But I'll be glad to help anyone else. I'd be glad to do the grunt work if anyone else wants to try to get this going. We need something stable. We need some kind of a stable platform that would provide a way for the lefty pundits to keep making a living, but without selling out to the oligarchs, if they ever did get a voice big enough to be heard. This isn't always blatant like the Vice News show. Whenever I hear David Dole or Cenk Uygur or Norm Solomon or other people like that say that we need to vote for Joe Biden because he's the lesser of two evils, then I wonder. I would like to see their tax returns when they say shit like that. And we need to keep people like Jeff Weaver and Chuck Rocha far, far away from this sort of venture. Anybody who has the faintest whiff of vote blue no matter who about them, or David Brock astroturfing, they need to be kept away. So we need a really savvy board that understands that we can't have sheepdogging. And if we don't start off with that, then we're not going to have anything going forward. The news has been really depressing lately, so if you think that might give you some hope, let's give it a shot. Let's kick the can down the road and see what happens.